Hey y'all, welcome to Art of the Budget. My name's Nicole, my pronouns are she and her, and I live in the Pacific Northwest on what is the traditional territory of the Coast Salish nations. Today we're going to be talking about how to stick to a budget when you already have one. This was a question on Instagram from Mo. Mo, if you're watching, thanks for the question. And I'm going to share my top tips, my top 5 tips, as well as one bonus tip, the thing that took me the longest to figure out that is specifically for artists or creatives, or if you have a very small fledgling business. So I'll get to that one at the end. If you enjoy hearing about personal finance, specifically for artists, then please subscribe to this channel. If you enjoyed the video, please like it. Thank you. Okay, let's get into my tips. So first, find the right budget. And when I look back in my files, I have so many different spreadsheets, so many different things that I try to make work to pay attention to my money. And I have to say, I'm not a natural budgeter. I'm not a natural saver. I'm basically the worst with money. So frankly, I was surprised to even find those things. But recently I have found that works for me. So before I found what works for me, what I used was the kind of like pay your fixed expenses, things like rent, electricity, things that always come out, and then just wing it for the rest, which means that I would wing things like groceries or gas. So things that are, variable, but pretty important. I wouldn't plan for them. Now, all the bills did get paid. I did pretty okay using the system, but I definitely overdrafted on occasion. And I definitely didn't have money for groceries on occasion. So it wasn't the greatest. But I will say that I have always had an excellent payment history on my credit report. So there's that to be said. Okay, so let's talk about budgets. Now, there are a million kinds of budgets. There's a different kind of budget for every person. And of course, this is going to take a little bit of trying things out. I'm just going to talk about 2 basic types of budgeting to kind of send you off in a direction if you don't have a sense of what works for you. What you want to do is find the system that really works for your brain. And thankfully on Personal Finance YouTube, so many people are sharing their budgets and even sharing their spreadsheets or sharing the app they use. Like I use everydollar, everydollar.com. So you can definitely get a feel for what's out there just from watching a few videos. So basically, I'm going to talk about the system I don't use first, and that is like the anti-budget. Essentially, this is kind of like what I was saying before, where you just have like money left over and you can use it as you like. But instead of only paying your fixed expenses like rent, electricity, you actually plan for and calculate your variable expenses. That's things like groceries, gas, eating out, or things that you want to do, like saving money, setting aside money for retirement, paying extra debt. You account for all of those things, and then whatever's kind of left at the end, that's kind of free money. Now, I, as mentioned, am not a natural saver, so this system doesn't really work for me. I really got to keep everything like locked in and be like looking at it a lot and really keep myself on track. If you look back at like September budget reconciliation, for example, I got a little spendy. I kind of like forgot to pay attention to my budget, and I mean, this was after years of working on my budget. So I like a more structured system, and so for me, the second main type of budget I want to talk about is the zero-based budget. So there's no extra in the zero-based budget. Basically, I have, and you can see this in my budget plan and budget check-ins and budget reconciliations, I've planned every single dollar. I've tried to plan every single dollar, and that is fixed expenses like rent and electricity, that is variable expenses like gas and groceries, and that is like my retirement, my savings, my sinking funds, anything that I know is coming down the pike, I plan for. And at the end of planning my budget, $0 are left over. So I give every single dollar a name. And of course I use the app, everydollar.com. I also use a spreadsheet, which I'm going to post down below. And I use that spreadsheet to give myself a big picture of the year. And then for my actual particular monthly budget, I then use everydollar. So I love a zero-based budget. The anti-budget just seems really cool too. And then of course there are, for your particular situation, do you have a salary? Do you have a variable income? There are ways to make those work. And again, I cannot recommend other folks on personal finance YouTube as resources enough, because there's so many cool ways to do that. And I'll post a couple of links, just sort of whatever I'm thinking of at the time. I'll post some links below so you can see some paycheck to paycheck budgets, some variable income budgets, etc. Okay, so the next tip that I have is to create some goals, or to figure out your why. And that's because, like, why should you be sticking to a budget? Is it just because someone told you you should have a budget? Someone told you you should contribute to your 401k? Like, what does that even mean? So like, I'm the most contrary person. If you tell me that I like have to do something just because, like, I'm just not going to do it. So for me, really figuring out why I'm doing things, what my goals are, how I can make my money work for me, has been really essential. And you might kind of know this if you watch regularly, but for me, that's old Nicole. 30 years from now, Nicole, I work in a field that's kind of hard on your body, and I want to know that eventually, if I need to, I can take a rest. More important than that, or I guess that's the most important, if I need to, I don't have to work just to survive. But I'm also an artist, and so I'd love it if one day I could just make my work and not have to make money from what I'm doing. I could just make what I want to make for my, just for passion, for my enjoyment. So yeah, also I really think it's important to share the wealth. So I want to be using part of my income to be shared with people and projects and things that I think are important. So yeah, figure out your why and let that motivate you instead of some feeling of obligation. Because if you have to say no to some things because you're sticking to a budget, you want to know that you're saying no for a good reason, right? Okay, so my next budget for sticking to your budget is think ahead. Now, this is kind of like one of those things that's going to be ongoing, because at first you'll set up your budget and you can look at receipts or the last few months of bank statements if you use a debit card to kind of figure out okay, what are things that are recurring, about how much money do I spend on gas, about how much money do I spend on groceries, about how much money do I spend eating out. And so you can sort of set your budget up from that. But as life progresses, things are going to come up. So maybe you pay your car insurance every month, like I do. There's no price break for paying it for 6 months. So I pay that every month. But then my car registration, and yours too, if you have a car, is probably every year. And so when that comes up in November, for me it comes up in November. So then the first time I was like, oh yeah, that thing. But now I have it in my budget and I take a part of it away every month. So whether you do it like that, or you just know it's coming and you cash flow it, as things come up, put them into the budget. So think ahead as much as possible and then keep track as things come up. Okay? And then also in that category, think about things that you maybe think you don't buy. Like, I kind of thought that I didn't buy clothes. Like, that wasn't even in my budget for the first 2 years, but I definitely buy clothes at the thrift store. I'm kind of addicted. So I have now figured out how to work that into the budget. So think ahead, and then also when things come up, keep them in mind for the future. All right, next tip is just looking at some notes over here on my laptop as usual. So next tip is progress, not perfection. So be realistic at first. If you spend $300 a month eating out, you know this from your bank records. Don't think I should really only spend $100. Maybe say, okay, my budget is going to include $300 for eating out, maybe $250. And then as that gets easier, so you've planned for it, as that gets easier, you might think, oh, I could spend a little less. Of course, if this is something you want to spend a little less on. That's just for example. So be really realistic at the beginning. Don't base your budget on what you want your budget to be. Base your budget on what it actually kind of is right now. And then know that you can adjust moving forward as you identify what areas bring you a lot of value and what areas could you whittle away and do something different with that money in. And that's going to be different for everyone. Okay. Well, along with that, when you fuck up, get back on the wagon. You're gonna mess up. I certainly do. And if you need some inspiration, just watch my budget reconciliations because I regularly mess up. But as you progress, it will become more of a habit, and I don't think I mess up every single month. I think I just run into new pitfalls, new ways to game the system, and the system is mine. So just keep on keeping on. And then, like, think about like which areas are bringing you the most joy. So for me, I spend a good amount on groceries. I could whittle this down. I definitely see people living on, $100 a month, $50 a month. I personally know that, like, I cook at home a lot. I love cooking. I love good food. I love supporting local businesses, and I love supporting ethical agriculture. So I spend $300 a month on groceries. I do often go over, but there are other areas like sort of general entertainment that I've managed to pretty much whittle down completely. So, the point is not to like torture yourself. The point is just to be putting your money where it's going to give you the most value as you define it. So yeah, figure out what those expenses are and figure out where you can bring them down. And then adjust as needed. The goal is not to torture yourself. It's just a plan in advance for things. Okay. And then my fifth tip is to grow the gap. So if you make a budget and you stick to it, hopefully the goal is that there'll be some money left at the end to allot, or if it's a zero-based budget, there'll be some money to allot towards savings or other goals that you have. Now, let's just take a moment to recognize that in the United States, lots of people don't make a living wage. They don't have enough money to budget their way out of not having enough money. I couldn't really find a definitive statistic, so if you know one, let me know down below. But based on what I did find, it seems like the majority of people, so more than 50% of folks in the US make less than $50,000. That's like what I make, and I know that sometimes it's tough, and so that's just something important to recognize. But if you do have enough income that you can budget it and make it do what you want, then you might want to find a way to have more to do with. And there are two ways to do that. One is to bring down, hey, here's Violet. One is to bring down your expenses. So growing the gap by bringing down what you spend so it's less and less than what you earn. And so that way you've got more left over to do things with. So that, of course, could be like bringing your grocery bill down, spending less money eating out, maybe even moving to a place with a lower cost of living so that you pay less rent, getting a housemate. That's something that I've done. If you don't, if you're already pretty tight to begin with, that might not work. And so something that you could consider is growing the gap by making more income. Oy boy. Here, buddy, go down here. Making more income. So that could be getting a promotion at your job. It could be moving to a different job in your same field. This could mean getting a side hustle like me, adjunct teaching and teaching in the community are my side hustles. That can bring your income up. And of course, keep in mind that that's not always sustainable because it can be kind of stressful if you have a lot of side gigs. So just think about what works for you if you have a particular goal. And so having several side gigs could help you reach that goal, and then you can move back to something more sustainable. That's something to think about. But either by lowering your income or lowering your expenses or raising your income, grow that gap so that you can do more with that money to reach your goals. And then my last tip for artists specifically is, and this was really hard for me to do. My last tip is to separate your personal and your business money if you haven't already, obviously. I know a lot of people are really organized and have done that from the get-go, but I personally wasn't that kind of artist. I did a lot of self-subsidy. So I I paid out of pocket to do a lot of art projects, and now I have separated those incomes. If you want, I can, if you want to watch a video about me separating them, I'll post a link in the cards and down below. But basically, now I have it set up so that anything that's going toward art, any expenses that are art related, come out of my art income. So either through sales or through specifically teaching like in the community, or teaching workshops, that kind of thing, that goes directly into my bank account for art. I deal with taxes if I need to, and then any expenses come directly out of that. I haven't totally cracked the code on that, but I have to say that was a huge money suck for me. And so now having it separate, at least I know that I'm not spending more than I make. And it's pretty close though. I don't make a lot of money doing specifically art stuff, but you might make a lot more money. So I know that I'm not making, spending more than I make. And I know that I'm not pulling out of my full-time state job income to subsidize my art. And like I said, I haven't totally cracked that code yet, but man, it's been really, really helpful. I basically just have a separate budget for my business, and it's almost exactly the same as my personal budget, but obviously it's different things. So yeah, that's my last tip. And then I just wanted to give you guys a little insight into what figuring out the budget was like for me. So like I said, you could look at 3 months of bank statements to figure out your basic budget, but like, whoa man, it took me way more than, you know, like looking back at 3 months and then like getting it together. People say it takes 1 to 3 months to figure out a budget. I might have just made that up, but it took me like 2 years. So basically, in 2016, at the end of very end of 2016, I found this year-long spreadsheet, which will be linked down below, and I created a year-long budget. And then for the entire year of 2017, I proceeded to document every single cent I spent in each category. However, I did not stick to the budget at all. I still was just totally winging it. And so I wasn't successful the entire first 12 months. But at the end of 2017, I had this pretty incredible document that let me know every single penny I spent and where I spent it. So for 2018, I was able to create my yearly budget from there. And around then, sometime in 2018, is when I really first started using everydollar regularly and like reconciling it at the end of the month. And I actually started sticking to the budget. Things have changed drastically since then. In November, I'm going to show a comparison of November 2018 and November 2019, but they definitely were taking off. But I just want to be clear, it took me a solid year. So my takeaways are from all of this, that basically budgeting is totally worth it because the feeling of like fear and dread, not knowing if money will be there, like starts to go away when you've planned. I do have a regular income. It's not variable, or it's not particularly variable. So I think that helps, but I think it might feel even better if you have a variable income to know I've budgeted, I've put money away, I know it's there. That was pretty amazing. The other takeaway is that I still need to check in every single week, maybe even every single day. That might be better actually. And I just need to keep everything really structured or I'll want to spend unchecked. So those are my 2 takeaways. I hope this helps you stick to a budget. If you got any favorite tips that worked really well for you, leave them down below. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and like this video, and I will see you later.